Here is the package you requested.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Let me know if you need anything
Eleanor
else.
Morgan alone once again in her high-tech hospital bed. 12 nurses in 8 weeks, a new record. Eleanor's eyes, the only part of her body she could still control, stared blankly at the ceiling, tears streaming silently down her temples. The accident had taken everything from her, her mobility, her independence, her dignity, but it couldn't take her fortune. Yet what good was $50 billion when you couldn't find a single person willing to stay by your side? If this story already has you intrigued, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for more powerful stories of human connection that will touch your heart. Your support helps us create more content like this. Before the accident, Eleanor Morgan had been unstoppable. At 35, she had transformed her father's struggling tech company into a global empire, making her one of the youngest female billionaires in the world. Business magazines plastered her face on their covers, praising her ruthless efficiency and brilliant strategic mind. What those glossy pages never mentioned was how many people she had stepped on to reach the top, the employees she'd fired without a second thought, the rivals she'd crushed, the family members she'd alienated. Now, 3 months after the private jet crash that severed her spinal cord and left her paralyzed from the neck down, Eleanor was discovering the bitter truth about the empire she'd built. Not a single executive from her company had visited after the initial publicity-friendly hospital appearances. Her cousins and distant relatives, the only family she had left, came by just long enough to assess their inheritance prospects. Her so-called friends had vanished like morning dew. All she had were paid staff who quit faster than she could learn their names, unable to tolerate her frustrated outbursts and demanding nature. Miles Reeves checked the address on his phone one more time, balancing the heavy grocery delivery box against his hip. Whitecliff Estate. He whistled low under his breath. In his 3 years as a delivery driver, he'd never had a drop-off in this exclusive cliffside neighborhood. The houses here weren't just homes, they were statements, monuments to wealth that people like him could only glimpse from a distance. At 32, Miles was the definition of struggling. A former construction worker whose back injury had left him with chronic pain and limited career options, he now pieced together a living from 3 different gig economy jobs. The delivery service was his main income, supplemented by weekend handyman work and evening shifts at his friend's bar. It was barely enough to cover rent on his studio apartment and send a little money to his daughter who lived with his ex-wife in another state. The mansion's security system buzzed him through after he stated his business. As he approached the imposing front door, it opened automatically, and a crisp British voice instructed him, "Please leave the delivery in the kitchen and exit promptly. Payment has been processed automatically including your tip." Miles frowned. Usually at these luxury homes, there was at least a housekeeper to receive deliveries. Shrugging, he entered and followed the subtle lighting that guided him to an enormous chef's kitchen that made his entire apartment look like a closet by comparison. As he set down the groceries, he heard a crash from somewhere deeper in the house, followed by what sounded like a strangled cry. Miles hesitated. The voice had clearly instructed him to leave and exit promptly. But that definitely sounded like someone in distress. "Hello?" he called out. "Is everything okay?" No response came, but he heard another thud. Against his better judgment, and probably against the delivery service's policies, Miles followed the sound. What he found changed the course of both their lives forever. In a room that resembled a high-end hospital suite more than a bedroom, a woman lay in a specialized bed, surrounded by monitors and medical equipment. Her thin arm had knocked over a water glass while attempting to reach a tablet that had fallen just out of view of her eye-controlled interface. Her face was flushed with frustration and embarrassment at being discovered in such a state. "I'm so sorry," Miles said immediately. "I heard a noise and thought someone might need help." The woman's eyes, startlingly intelligent and fierce despite her immobile state, fixed on him with suspicion. A computerized voice emerged from speakers in the room, "The exit is the way you came. Your services are no longer required." Miles should have left. He had 2 more deliveries waiting and couldn't afford to lose this job. But something in her expression, beyond the anger, a profound loneliness that he recognized all too well, made him pause. "Let me just clean up this glass and water before I go," he said, spotting paper towels on a nearby table. "And I can put that tablet back where you can use it." The woman's eyes widened slightly, then narrowed. The computerized voice remained silent as Miles quickly mopped up the spill, carefully picked up the shards of glass, and positioned the tablet exactly where she directed with small eye movements. "Is there anything else you need before I go?" he asked. After a long pause, the mechanical voice responded, "No." But as he turned to leave, it spoke again. "What is your name?" "Miles. Miles Reeves. I'm Eleanor Morgan." He knew that name. Everyone did. The tech mogul whose accident had been front-page news months ago. "Nice to meet you, Ms. Morgan. I hope your day gets better." As Miles walked out, he had no idea that Eleanor's assistant would be calling the delivery service within the hour, requesting that Miles Reeves be assigned to all future deliveries to the Morgan estate. What began as twice-weekly grocery deliveries soon evolved into something more. Eleanor, who communicated through her eye-tracking system, began asking Miles to stay a few minutes after each delivery. At first, it was simple requests, adjusting her pillows, changing the channel on her television, reading her emails aloud when her eye-tracking system was giving her migraines. Miles found himself drawn to this complicated woman. Despite her physical limitations, Eleanor's mind remained razor-sharp. She was demanding and sometimes abrupt, but Miles recognized these traits as defenses rather than her true nature. When he gently called her out for snapping at him, her computerized apologies carried a genuine remorse that her synthetic voice couldn't fully mask. For Eleanor, Miles was a breath of fresh air. Unlike the nurses and caregivers who treated her with clinical detachment or thinly veiled pity, Miles spoke to her normally. He made terrible jokes that somehow still made her laugh, a strange computerized sound that embarrassed her until she saw that Miles wasn't mocking her for it. He told her about his daughter Lily's latest school achievements and his struggles to stay connected with her despite the distance. He never asked about her wealth or her company, seeming entirely uninterested in the fortune that had defined her for so long. 2 months into their unusual acquaintance, Eleanor made Miles an offer. Her latest nurse had quit the previous day, and the agency was struggling to find a replacement. "I want to hire you," her computerized voice announced as Miles arranged fresh flowers beside her bed. "Full-time. Double whatever you're making now with your 3 jobs combined." Miles nearly dropped the vase. "Ms. Morgan, I have no medical training. I wouldn't know the first thing about proper care for someone with your needs. I have medical professionals who visit daily. What I need is someone who doesn't look at me like I'm already dead. Someone who sees me as a person." A pause, then, "Someone who isn't afraid of me." The offer was tempting, more than tempting. The money would mean he could move closer to his daughter, see her more than once a month. But Miles had concerns. "I'm not looking for charity," he said quietly. Eleanor's eyes flashed. "And I'm not offering any. This is a business proposition. I'm a demanding employer who will expect you to earn every penny." A smile tugged at his lips. "That I can believe." And so began an arrangement that puzzled everyone in both their worlds. Miles gave notice at his 3 jobs and moved into the guest house on Eleanor's estate. Her lawyers drew up contracts that her financial advisors deemed unnecessarily generous. Miles insisted on proper training, spending 2 weeks learning from home health professionals about the specific care Eleanor needed, from the operation of her sophisticated medical equipment to the physical therapy exercises that maintained her muscle tone. The adjustment wasn't easy. Eleanor's temper flared when her limitations frustrated her. Miles sometimes felt overwhelmed by the responsibility. They argued fiercely, her with her computerized voice that couldn't convey nuance, him with his stubborn refusal to be intimidated by her status. "Just because you can't move doesn't give you the right to be cruel," he told her one day after a particularly cutting remark. The silence that followed was heavy until her synthetic voice spoke with unusual softness. "You're right. I'm sorry, Miles." Slowly, imperceptibly at first, they began to change each other. Eleanor, who had spent a lifetime equating vulnerability with weakness, found herself sharing fears she'd never admitted to anyone, her terror that her mind would eventually deteriorate to match her body, her regret over the relationships she'd sacrificed for success, her nightmares about the crash that replayed whenever she closed her eyes. Miles, who had built walls around his heart after his divorce, found himself lowering those defenses. He told Eleanor about his failed marriage, his constant fear of disappointing his daughter, the back injury that had derailed his life and left him with chronic pain that he hid from everyone. 6 months into their arrangement, Miles received a call that his ex-wife had been offered a job overseas and wanted to take Lily with her. The thought of his daughter moving across the ocean devastated him. That night, Eleanor found him sitting in the garden, staring blankly at the stars. "Fight for her," Eleanor's computerized voice instructed after he explained the situation. Miles shook his head. "With what? I can't afford the legal fees for a custody battle. And what kind of life could I give her anyway?" Eleanor was silent for a long moment. "Then, I'll pay for the lawyers. The best in the country." "I can't accept that. It's not a gift. It's an advance on your salary. It would take years to repay." "Then you'll have to stay here for years," Eleanor replied, the computerized voice unable to capture the emotion behind the words. "I need you here anyway." The simple admission, "I need you," hung between them, changing everything. With Eleanor's resources behind him, Miles secured a co-parenting arrangement that allowed Lily to stay in the country, splitting her time between her parents. When Eleanor suggested that Lily could stay at the estate during Miles's custody periods, he was hesitant, until he saw how the two connected during their first meeting. 10-year-old Lily was initially intimidated by Eleanor's condition but quickly became fascinated by the technology that allowed Eleanor to communicate. Eleanor, who had never spent much time around children, was surprised by Lily's quick mind and forthright questions. "Does it hurt to be paralyzed?" Lily asked during their first dinner together. "Lily," Miles admonished. "It's all right," Eleanor's voice responded. "No, it doesn't hurt physically. But it hurts in other ways, like when you want to scratch your nose and can't." Lily nodded solemnly. "That would be really hard. But you're still really smart, right? Your brain still works perfect?" "My brain works perfectly, yes," Eleanor replied, and if her computerized voice could have conveyed amusement, it would have. "That's good. Dad says smart is more important than anything else anyway." From that day, Eleanor became an unexpected influence in Lily's life. She arranged for tutors when Lily showed an aptitude for mathematics. She listened to the girl's dreams with a seriousness that made Lily stand taller. And in return, Lily brought a lightness to the mansion that had been missing for too long. As the 1-year mark of their arrangement approached, new challenges emerged. Eleanor's board of directors, concerned about her prolonged absence from the company, began making moves to reduce her control. Her cousin, who stood to inherit a significant portion of her wealth, filed a legal petition questioning her mental competence to manage her affairs. Miles watched as Eleanor fought these battles with the same fierce intelligence that had built her empire. But he also saw the toll it took on her, the exhaustion in her eyes after video conferences with her lawyers, the tension in her jaw when another legal document required her attention. "They think because my body is broken, my mind must be too," she told him one evening. "They're waiting for me to give up." "Are you going to?" Miles asked, adjusting her position so she could see the sunset through the windows. "I never have before." Her eyes met his. "But I'm tired, Miles. Sometimes I wonder if it's worth the fight." It was the closest she'd come to admitting defeat, and it frightened him more than he could say. The legal battles intensified. Rumors spread through the business world that Eleanor Morgan was incapacitated beyond recovery. Former associates gave anonymous interviews suggesting she was no longer capable of leading her company. The board scheduled a vote to significantly reduce her authority. 3 days before the vote, Eleanor asked Miles to help her do something she hadn't done since the accident: appear in public. "I need to show them I'm still here," she said. Still thinking. Still fighting. With Miles's help and a medical team standing by, Eleanor attended the board meeting in her specialized wheelchair, using her eye-controlled system to deliver a presentation that left the board members stunned into silence. Her strategic vision was clear, her understanding of the market undiminished, her authority unquestionable. The vote to limit her power was withdrawn unanimously. As they returned to the mansion afterward, Eleanor's exhaustion was evident, but so was her triumph. "Thank you," her computerized voice said. "I couldn't have done that without you." "Yes, you could have," Miles countered. "But I'm glad you didn't have to." That night, as Miles was helping her prepare for bed, Eleanor's system spoke words he never expected to hear: "I think I'm falling in love with you." Miles froze. "Eleanor." "You don't need to respond," she interrupted. "I know the circumstances make this complicated. I know you see yourself as my employee. I know my condition makes any relationship seem impossible." A pause. "But I needed you to know that you've given me back more than just my dignity. You've given me a reason to keep fighting." Miles sat beside her bed, his heart pounding. "I care about you deeply," he said carefully. "But I don't want you to confuse gratitude or dependency with love. Do you think I don't know the difference?" If her computerized voice could have sounded indignant, it would have. "I've had plenty of time to analyze my feelings, Miles. Too much time, perhaps." He took her hand, a gesture that had become natural between them. "Then give me time to analyze mine." The relationship that developed between them defied easy categorization. Miles remained Eleanor's caregiver, but they were also partners, confidants, and eventually, yes, lovers in the ways that were possible given her condition. It wasn't a conventional romance, but it was deeply intimate in ways that transcended physical limitations. Lily, now spending half her time at the estate, blossomed under their combined influence. Eleanor helped her develop her natural intelligence while Miles encouraged her compassion and resilience. Together, they created a family unit that none of them had expected but all of them treasured. 2 years after Miles first delivered groceries to Eleanor's door, she proposed a new venture, a foundation dedicated to developing adaptive technologies for people with severe disabilities. It would operate separately from her company but utilize its resources and expertise. "I want you to run it with me," she told Miles. "Your perspective as a caregiver is invaluable. You see needs and solutions that engineers miss." "I'm not qualified," he began. "You weren't qualified to care for a quadriplegic billionaire either," she reminded him. "But you did it anyway, and you changed my life in the process." The Eleanor and Miles Foundation launched 6 months later. Its first project was an improved eye tracking system that allowed users more natural communication with dynamic voice options that could convey emotion. Eleanor was the first test subject. The day the new system was ready, Miles sat beside her as the engineers made the final adjustments. When they were finished, Eleanor tested it with a simple phrase, "Hello, Miles." But instead of the flat, computerized tone he'd grown accustomed to, the voice that emerged had inflection, warmth, and a quality that somehow captured Eleanor's essence. Miles felt tears spring to his eyes. That's amazing," he said. "Now you can hear how I sound in my head," Eleanor's new voice replied, the emotion in the words clearly audible. "How I've always sounded when I talk to you."